Hey, this is Rashonda Thornton, the Dietitian Against Diets podcast show. I am excited to introduce you to my new monthly panel series called Heart and Grit, Conversations with Mindful Leaders. Now, through these conversations, you will be able to connect to the trials and tribulations that they struggle, but also recognizing the success they've had in their lives. Thanks to Midwest Dairy, every month I will be joined by a different dynamic set of leaders who have done all the footwork behind the scenes, but they have done it with a passion and with their heart. This is an opportunity to connect with their stories, learn their struggles, and celebrate their successes. But most of all, find a way to connect to your life and how this can be an inspiration to you. Okay, well, welcome to another episode of Heart and Grit Panel Discussion, Conversation with Mindful Leaders. If anything cannot come at good timing, couldn't be better than this for January's panel. So we have the new year coming in. A lot of people are focused on their wellness. So I pulled together these unique trailblazers within the wellness industry, not just even in the U.S., but also encapsulating other areas like Canada. So we're kind of hitting all areas of the North American continent right now. I want to introduce you to my guests today. I'm introduce the realms of what we're going to focus on and the specific leaders within those realms. So we're going to start off with we're going to talk about mental health. And I have with me Dr. Michelle Cooley-Strickland. She's a psychologist and CEO of Dr. Michelle, LLC. And we're also going to bring in nutrition. As you know from myself, that's a heavy piece. And I'm bringing along with you Dr. Krista Scott-Dixon. She is Director of Curriculum at Precision Nutrition, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. And the last, not least, missing link to overall wellness is our physical strength and our physical health. So I have with me Alex Zimmerman, who is the Senior Director of Personal Training and Development at Equinox. So with these leaders coming from all parts of the country and all parts of the industry, they have steamrolled change and have distinctive concepts within their respective companies. So I want to say welcome everyone to the panel today.
Thank you.
Yes. So it's always fun. I wish I could always just pull back the behind the scenes conversations because it's always kind of cool to see everyone interacting. As you find on here, like-minded people find a ways that there's very small numbers of separation between who you know. And so as you see, everyone has at least heard of each other or knows something about each other. And I think that just kind of reflects the powerfulness of the wellness industry. So again, as you see on here, we have a lot of people that these individuals are in leadership positions. And it's really cool to see that end of it, the end product. But, when it comes to the purpose of this conversation is like what work is being done behind the scenes that has helped these individuals get to where they're at. So a lot of times it always comes with this decision that you make first. And that decision begets the next decision, which leads to pathway. So I'm going to open up the conversation and talk to you, Dr. Michelle, first, because you also teach at UCLA and Johns Hopkins University. And you also have several different things within your business. Now, I know when someone decides to build their own practice or go into their own business, that idea of stability kind of is a little shaky. But they do it for a reason, because there's always a chance it can collapse, right? So when you decide to take on another realm with your private practice, what was it that opened up that pathway for you?
Well, thank you again for having us, Rashonda. I think the real impetus, the real push for establishing Dr. Michelle as a separate entity, a business, was just the demand. People kept asking, are you seeing private clients? And my answer would be no. I used to teach. I now am a researcher, straight researcher, both at UCLA and at Johns Hopkins University. And I was trained as a clinician, and when I was in graduate school, I realized I didn't want to just see clients one after another, hour after hour, 40 hours a week for 49 weeks a year for 40 years. And so I expanded to do research in academia, and that was a positive move at the time. But also with the doctorate in philosophy, you get to have a lot of breadth to your career. And I try to encourage people and help them understand that we work for 30, 40, 50 years. And so provide for yourself the opportunity that you can make pivots and shifts. And so I was perfectly fine doing what I was doing, but I did miss some aspects of having patients and being able to see them and treat them individually. And because of psychology, clinical psychology, you're mandated to have license. And I was coming from Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, I was licensed in Maryland, but not in California. So that meant I had to go back and get some more classes and get licensed and take the exam. And I don't know about you guys, but I love to learn and I hate tests. So I had promised myself that, Michelle, if you take this one last exam, I promise you won't have any more. And then that was a lie, because then I had to do another and another. It really was that people were asking and to provide a service. And so I knew the market was there, and the issue was learning the business behind it. That was the harder part for me personally. But it's been a joy, because it allows me to have a lot of latitude in doing a lot of different things, not just research and teaching and seeing patients, but also writing and speaking and doing things like this, like your show.
Yeah, and I agree. Like, there's never the end to educating and finding new pathways. And I think that's the beauty of being human and recognizing your ability to stretch. And so obviously you have a decision to do one thing, but that can open up doors for uncharted territory, for lack of better words, in your respective life. So, no, I do agree with you, and knowing that it does come with its ifs, and, it may or may not work, but if you see it as a need there, you kind of push that to the side and pursue that. And to me, that's what I see that you're doing. Yeah.
Thanks. I mean, I think that what I tell people is that you fail at 100% of the things that you don't try. So it's better to go ahead and try, and then you'll end up successful in some capacity. It might not be where you envisioned for yourself, but it certainly is a far cry from where you were sitting on your couch, just dreaming about it.
Yeah, I agree. Yep, you gotta put action behind your thoughts and not just let it be a dream, but try to fulfill it. Now, I'm going to move the question on to you, Dr. Krista Scott. I'm going to call you KSD so I can be hip. So when people see your title, if they open up your resume, they see that you have a track record of academia in respects to publications, teaching, and many other literature contributions. Now, with that being said, did you yourself personally, or within your life, with that being your beginning steps, did you see yourself where you're at now as far as your alignment and leading the curriculum for precision nutrition? And if so, what was it that you felt it was time to shift everything and you've grown to be about into that compartment?
Yeah, it's a great question. And my first opening piece of advice to anyone listening is, whatever plan you have will probably just get blown out of the water. So even if I had a plan, it was blown out of the water multiple times. And, we've just heard that you fail 100% of the things you don't try. You actually fail a remarkable amount of things that you do try, or at least, they work for a while and they don't work out forever. And so I had a very circuitous path into what I'm doing now. And at the time in academia, if any of you have ever gone through academia, you might have had the experience of finding it quite constraining, quite narrow. There's often a lot of preoccupation about going outside your discipline. You're not supposed to do that. And so when I was coming up in my academic career, I was really interested in a lot of different things. I started as a fine arts major, visual arts and film. I thought I wanted to be an artist, and then I thought I wanted to be a teacher. And I had this really crazy path, and then I quit academia. And so really there was no plan. There were things I wanted to do and that I was interested in, and I followed the curiosity. And over time, I accumulated a skill set that was transferable. And I think that's something to think about. Look at the skills that you've accumulated to this point and ask yourself, can I apply them in different ways? And almost in every case you can, unless it's some really obscure technical skill. And so I was able to find myself in this role, but it was definitely not planned. And I really do feel like in this role, my role changes every 3 to 6 months. So I have no idea what I'm going to be doing in 3 to 6 months. In January 2020, we all started 2020, in the normal way. And then by March of 2020, I was leading panels on COVID responses, right? Mm-hmm. So I think, this year more than anything else has taught us that there really is no plan, there is no script, and you can certainly have direction, you can certainly try to accumulate skills that will give you lots of opportunities. But in terms of having a plan, I think very, very few of us, especially as we progress in our career, end up exactly where we thought we would be, or doing things exactly in the way that we thought we should or could or would. And that's okay. The better thing to do is to be responsive and adaptive and agile and flexible.
Yeah, and I was gonna say the flexibility is that's kind of what you want to be able to embrace. I was always told, even as a dietitian, don't go down the rabbit hole too deep. Find other aspects that can connect with what you do, so you can bring that into other areas. So you can expand other things about yourself, make it a little bit more diverse. Besides digging so deep to where you're stuck in that one spot, and then you have to do something completely different to go somewhere else. So I appreciate you talking about how you decide what's transferable and how can you utilize some of those skills in other areas. You have to stretch yourself. Just like Dr. Michelle, we got to stretch ourselves. So Alex, I'm going to, talk a little bit, because I know Equinox has made a lot of transformation since it first came to birth. And it's actually, known to be one of the most respected innovators when it comes to physical exercise and pulling together nutrition and regeneration. Now, I read some of your story that you used to submit it back to me, and I know that you feel like physical fitness has always been a part of you just from the beginning. How did the birth and the evolution of Equinox and yourself align to where you find your place, yourself in this position?
Yeah, well, I actually, just in hearing the other stories, and Krista, I love what you're saying, because I'm a big fan of Yuval Harari. And, he talks a lot about the future and how adaptability might become the most important skill you could possibly have. And so it just made me think of that. But for me, in this moment, I actually just realized that there's been 3 significant inflections in my life, and they have all been tied to what are recognizably probably some of the worst times historically in our respective lives. One being 9/11. I was actually working at a software development company developing websites, and I was doing graphic arts and web design, and I was passionate about that. And 9/11 basically just wiped out, every job, and everything slowed down in the dot-com boom. I thought after a year at work, I was gonna retire at 30, and then I was out of a job 2 years later, literally. So I think I passed out 1,000 resumes, and then I just went back to my roots. I went back to what I was passionate about. I was a collegiate athlete, and I loved reading about nutrition and fitness and what have you. And it was driven, primarily from an aesthetic perspective and those things that we often get into fitness and health for. But it becomes something very different over time. And so I started working at Equinox in 2001 or 2002 rather. And that was simply just because I was pursuing my passion. And then in 2008, when things started going down again with the recession, I realized that was an important moment for me, because I was just one of many. And so for me, the most important thing at that point was to pursue my education. And that's where I felt like I had an opportunity to maybe distinguish myself. Personal training is one of those fields where there is a lot of people who are personal trainers, and I think it's difficult to distinguish yourself. So for me, pursuing my master's degree was a really important inflection point, and that helped evolve things for me in terms of my career development with Equinox. And now, this most recent, actually, now we're in the middle of, I think, something we will never forget, this pandemic. And now Equinox is at an important inflection point in its development, going from primarily a physical experience to now a blended physical and digital experience. And I have the opportunity to play a significant role in that. And like Krista said, I think it's really more so an accumulation of skills and trying to continue to remain adaptable in looking at what those transferable skills are, whether it's the way you communicate, the way you learn. My master's degree, I did not become more of an expert in motor learning because I got my master's in motor learning, but I did continue to evolve my skills as it relates to learning and reading and writing and communicating and the discipline of learning and those things. And I think that those are the things that have allowed me to continue to grow alongside Equinox as a brand, which was maybe, I think, 15 clubs when I started, and now it's at 106 clubs.
Wow.
And so to go from picking up towels for minimum wage to now having the opportunity to work alongside Equinox as a global lifestyle leader, to me, that's been an incredible experience.
And I love that part because, you have to start somewhere. And, if it's the grunt work, again, it's I always told when it comes to integrity, integrity is what you do when no one's watching. And so just keep, nothing is too small potatoes, because you never know who's around, how your name travels, what builds your name, your reputation, and that precedes you. So the fact that
that's how members actually decide who to work with. They look out on the floor and they see people who are either engaging in their job in a way in which seems authentic, or they're not. And that's how people decide whether or not they're going to work with a personal trainer. It's not what you're saying once you get FaceTime with that person. It most definitely, and we know this, we know that members oftentimes can identify who they feel they want to work with by the way that person just carries themselves and their enthusiasm that they have for the job that's in front of them.
Yeah. And so again, it's standing out. How are you standing out? What are you doing extra to just affirm like what you represent, your level of professionalism, your level of education, just so they can continue to move forward. So that even like goes into like the uniqueness of like each of your respected roles, because I know you talked about the growth and evolution of Equinox as it's evolving. And I would tell you, being a dietitian working in the wellness industry, I always heard of this company that would come in, and I always see these books that said precision nutrition. I'm like, what is precision nutrition? And I just only saw things on the outside. But when you talk about, Alex, when you're talking about, how, you continue to educate yourself and pursue and get to different levels. I had opportunity, to work with precision nutrition at a particular level, and I met KSD, and I found out that it's way more to it than nutrition. And that's the part I love, because it's not just, like you said, the aesthetic piece of it. It's going a lot deeper behind that. And that's, to me, that's the uniqueness that precision nutrition presents itself. But I want to ask you, KSD, the ins and outs of your company. Why do you feel it's a representation who you are personally?
That's such an interesting question, and I've actually been meditating on it since you prepped us earlier and asked it. And at first I almost felt resistance to answering it, because I was like, gosh, that's so egocentric. And then I was like, well, but I've been developing curriculum for them for over a decade now. So of course there's got to be some piece of me in there. And I think the piece that's the most me in there, well, there's probably a couple. One of them is the humor. I think that, it's indefensible to create something that's humorless. So there's always humor sneaked in somewhere. But, for me, the big thing, and this comes from having a multidimensional background, but it also comes from seeing the suffering that occurs when we only focus on one domain of life. And if you've been in the fitness and wellness business, you've probably seen people who have focused on one tiny aspect. Maybe it's their eating or their exercise or how their body looks or functions, to the exclusion of everything else. And that's not the kind of people I felt that we wanted to create. So I've really tried to advance this very multidimensional agenda of coaching, where we look at the whole person. And not just the whole person, because I think many of us are familiar with like holistic coaching, but the whole person in a context. And I think certainly, the events of 2020 around social justice and power and privilege have shown us that we don't just exist in isolation. We're not this like free floating like island, right? As human beings, we exist in a context, and that context also shapes our choices and how we think and how we feel. And so I've really tried to advance this idea that we're looking at a very rich, complicated human being in front of us. And that human being has a whole life. and is embedded in like networks. They know people, they live in certain environments. Do they live on the East Coast, the West Coast? What kind of person are they? How much money do they make? Like, there's all these factors that go into shaping people's choices. So I think if I'm leaving any kind of legacy at Precision Nutrition, it's really pushing people to think like at all these different levels of scale, and to see the person in front of them as being a very complex, rich, multifaceted, often contradictory human being that is embedded in a context. So hopefully that's something that people take away. It's not just about meal plans. It's not just about macros. It's not about whether you choose a salad for lunch. It's about helping another human being, and particularly to alleviate their suffering and offer compassion to them as they look to do a little bit better in their lives.
And I like how you said, like, no one's a floating island. And that's where I feel like we compartmentalize different aspects of health. And I see Dr. Michelle, I'm waiting for her to nod. And like, she nods. I'm like, yep, because I see the similar languages to what we're all speaking about. And I feel like Dr. Cooley can definitely kind of piggyback off that whole aspect of that. We're just not one entity. There's a lot of moving pieces around us. And that's a part of your wellness change, your wellness journey, your wellness development.
Yeah, true. One of the common themes I think that I pursue also KSD is culture and context. So it's understanding the individual within the culture in which they live and the context at the time in which they're living, because the decisions, the choices, the opportunities that people have are embedded in that multi-level understanding, and we make our jobs harder if we don't really understand, you mentioned the whole person. Yeah, the whole person in context within their culture. So that is a similarity, because to do that, to not have those considerations thwarts the sustaining of the gains that people have when they work with Alex, or they work with you, or they work with Rashonda, or they work with myself. If you want to have long-term sustained change, you have to consider that as part of the treatment. And people enjoy it better. I mean, Alex talked about how people observe before they make decisions to make choices, and they're watching us as much as we are watching them. And it's that bidirectionality that makes for the deep relationship that sustains.
Yeah, I agree. And I was going to actually loop you in, because from where I gather, and again, if we're still in the beginning of this whole panel discussion, we all know that there's just a lot of work to be done in so many different ways. And but I do believe that's why we're all gifted to have those passions and those specific areas within our career, our business endeavors. Dr. Michelle, now I know that you have a couple of kids. So you have your mother, you do research, you have taught. You've been in the academic world as well. And I'm not sure if anyone else knows, but she also has a podcast show. Called, now,
the microphone.
Yeah, there she goes. She already knows. So she also has a podcast show, along with these other things that she's doing. But again, I really feel like even for all of us, we're leaders because we know that there's work to be done. We're willing to take on that load to make that happen. And even when we have several things on our plate, as Dr. Michelle does, I'm sure KSD and Alex, you guys do too. Alex just moved. He just moved. He's in a transition of moving from one side of the country to the other, and still made time to jump on his podcast show. So there you go. We have other responsibilities, but there's something that's in us that keeps us wanting to keep moving that needle. So for Dr. Michelle, I want to ask you, what is that gets you up in the morning, getting just refreshed every day to just keep pushing that needle to do more? What inspires you?
Well, gratefully, I come from a family, multi-generational. We go way back, and function under the adage that to whom much is given, much is required. And it doesn't matter how little you have, you still have enough to give back and to try to make this world a better place. And we each have been given talents and have some form of treasure that we can share. And it's my inspiration to try to give more. to help other people become their best self. And each of us here on this panel that you've brought together, thank you, Rashonda, works every day to help other people become their best selves. And that is an unending task, but it is equally rewarding, because when you see small changes in people, it's a huge reward in and of itself. And the podcasting world is and vodcasting world, I think, offers so many opportunities, because I've written scientific publications, numerous, and you can look at the impact scores, and you can look at, because they're based on the research that I've done with colleagues and in terms of leading grants. And you look at the impact, you look at the numbers of people who cited your research articles and other journal articles, and there's a big impact that you can do in one area, and then you can do Two Funny Mamas and get 15, 16,000 views in a week or two. And so even though it's more work, it's something different. It is rewarding, because whether it's a one-on-one patient that I'm working with and I'm like, oh, they finally got it, yay. Or it's seeing comments from people who've seen your show and just like, oh my goodness, they're going to use the advice that you gave them. We are driven intrinsically by wanting to do our part. And so that gets me up in the morning. It keeps me up at night. But every day is a great day, because we get to help people. And in that, it's extraordinarily rewarding. And I'm looking at the quadrants. I'm like, who am I talking to? I guess we all know that. And for the listeners to know that as well, that we are invested in your health and well-being. And we will work as hard as you to help you to get to where you want to be, because life is so good on the other side.
It is. Oh my God, that is so true. Oh my, and it's that because of that, because we know that, we already know what it looks like and what it feels like on the other side. We're trying to help people find that path, their path to get them there. Totally agree. Alex, speaking of paths, you mentioned when you first started working at Equinox, you were picking up towels. So now you're basically heading and directing the development within the personal training department. And this is a new role for you, relatively speaking. Do you feel like where you're at now is just reiteration of the heart you have in your venture as far as being in this physical fitness world? Or do you feel like this is just another added addition to your plate of how you can expand your skill set in helping others?
Yeah, I think, and just thinking about kind of the passion that we have and what really drives us. And you're asking if this is just kind of another step in where I see myself going, or if I feel like I've kind of reached. Is that?
Yes, like,
kind of
and I guess let me just ask in a different way. Again, we talked about, right where we're at currently, it looks like it's really nice on the outside, but we forget that these people, especially you individuals, you worked from the ground, to get to where you're at. So with you being in several different roles as you're growing with the company, do you feel the alignment where you're at now is great timing for where you want to be, or do you see this as just another extension of your continuing expansion?
Yeah, well, what I would say is that, I may have been equally successful if I got a degree in political science. I think that might have been, a helpful way to continue to succeed. And what I mean by that is that, I think in a complex environment that requires a lot of collaboration, it requires a lot of patience, it requires, I think these types of skills, no matter the position that you're in, regardless of the skills that you have, how you get along with people and the impression that you leave with people is going to be the only thing that will determine your success and growth. And so I think that regardless of the role that I play on this giant team of Equinox, which, is the mission and the power of the brand is going to be successful no matter what, because it's an amazing brand. But I think that the role and the opportunity that I have to be able to inspire others to bring out the best in themselves, which is a theme on this, between this group. So I really feel very humble in my role of being able to now impact more people. So the role that I was playing was a little bit more of a niche aspect of our business, where I was driving T-Rex, which is the elite level of training at Equinox. And so I was driving that program, and that was a smaller subset of the employee base. I am very, very driven and motivated by the opportunities that Equinox brings. We have many people who are earning six figures and they might not have a high school degree. And I think that that's really powerful, that you're able to impact the totality of someone's life. So when you work with your clients, you can impact their health and fitness, but sometimes going beyond that, there's boundaries, right? I mean, we have certain limitations in the way in which we engage with people, but the way in which we have the opportunity to enrich the lives of our employees that scale far beyond, it's getting them to maybe be able to buy their first home, or getting, you're there when they start a family, or you're there. And so I think that, my opportunity to do that, I couldn't think of anything more except for maybe more people. Not necessarily like right now I'm helping to head up programming and development, but that's just kind of one subset of the whole picture, that I feel like I have an opportunity to reach a larger, population. And that is what is really inspiring me for this next opportunity. And that's exactly where I want to be right now. And who knows what the future holds, but I'm very excited about that opportunity.
Yes. It's like a full ecosystem. It's not just your immediate, their direct contact with your clients or your patients, but it's also those that you work with to keep this whole system moving, and to, fulfill everyone's needs and hopes and dreams, along with it. So that's a unique concept that Equinox carries and that their leaders carry. So, and I'm gonna keep talking to you, Alex, about this, because I always talk about, to me, I use the analogy, or not the analogy, the saying, strength equals strength. And when anything comes with great work, it becomes complicated, it becomes uncomfortable, it becomes doubting yourself, your own personal thing that happens behind the scenes that people may not know about. From your journey, from where you have been over the last 20 years, what have been your biggest struggles, and how have you been able to overcome them and keep yourself in these positions where you're continuing to grow and to help others and along the way?
That's a big question. Obviously, we face personal challenges, whether it be negative self-talk or whether it be doubting yourself. I think that for me, I think that I really held myself back because of my lack of education in regards to, my field. And I just felt like, I think that when you're maybe not bringing your most authentic self because of whatever it is that, you might be overcompensating for, or posturing, or, and so for me, I think that continuing your education really helps empower you, and it gives you a stronger sense of self. And then that allows you to be more authentic in your relationships. And I think that, just learning to not win. I think some of the work that Simon Sinek has done around, I think playing the long game and not trying to win, but more so trying to maximize your interactions and ensuring that you're bringing your authentic self. And so for me, it's really just been continuing my education so that I don't feel that I constantly have something to prove. And I think that has allowed me to continue to be more successful in something that I was able to overcome. And it's tough. Learning is tough, committing yourself, time, dollars, etc. But I think that now with the educational opportunities that are out there, people can take their time, one class at a time, or just, continuing to learn, I think is really what's been most impactful for me in overcoming some of maybe my personal challenges along the way.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. And I like that, you're really emphasizing the education piece, because even if it's just for yourself, to where you build that confidence, you have equipped yourself with that foundational pieces to keep you moving forward in your career. I think that's within itself is valuable. So, when you're on a panel with these other people that have these other titles that start with doctor, you automatically think, oh my God, I can't even have a conversation with them, or whatever we talk about will be over our head. But as any leader, we're all human too, and we all carry our own struggles when we are driving home, when we're laying in our bed, when we're watching some sorry stop movie, like whatever it is, we find those times and those places where we do have our own personal struggles, but sometimes people wouldn't even think of it, and they think that we're flawless, we're relentless, but we are human too. And so, Dr. Michelle, I'm going to bring this question to you, because you do have a lot of things that's happening, and so anyone on the outside would just see only that. But, not trying to say what's the human inside of that, but like, how can you help those people that really, connect with you and know that, everything that you've done it wasn't all pretty. It wasn't, there was a lot of long nights, a lot of stressful days that have been a part of your journey.
Well, yeah, just to be a fly on the wall, I specialized in anxiety disorders because I suffered from anxiety disorders, and I didn't know until I was actually in graduate school, oh, there's a label for that. Well, if there's a label for that, that must mean there's a treatment for that. You can get better. So it was kind of, I worked hard on treating myself by learning. So relating back to what Alex is saying about education, it's about knowledge and education, and you don't have to get a formal degree or formally specialize in anything, but it's just the confidence that you gain through learning that you are, number one, not alone. Number two, there's a treatment for that. Or number three, that, oh, wow, that's just plain interesting. So that makes me more interesting to other people, because I am interested in learning and growing, and I have new things that I'm passionate about and want to discuss. My biggest struggles, I think, had to do with the imposter syndrome, that, it doesn't matter how many degrees, because it's not about the degrees. I was the youngest in my graduate school class. I was the first to finish my dissertation. I was the first. I was very driven, and I still am. But just because you have those certificates or whatever it is, doesn't mean you internally believe what it is that the external validation says. And so that's an internal struggle. That's something that we have to process through ourselves. So that imposter syndrome. Another thing that I struggled through and continue to do so is the fear of success. A lot of people talk about the fear of failure, but there's also real truth to the fear of success. So what happens if I reach my dream? The problem is that I like my life. I mean, I can't envision adding more to it if I were to actually succeed. So I'm not even going to try, because I'm good. Yeah, good enough. It's good enough. But you have to push through that, because we as humans can adapt to any kind of circumstance. Why not adapt to better, or adapt to more, or adapt to something that's a greater challenge, but it makes life even more worthwhile? So that's something that I encourage people to push through too, because the nice thing to learn, and through my podcast, my co-host and I interview a lot of very successful women about the journeys that they've taken to get to where they are. And Krista talked about the non-traditional path, and the same with Alex. It's a non-traditional. Rashonda, you started off as a molecular biologist. Who would have known, that you'd go where you are? But it is about pushing past your comfort zone and taking risks and doing more because it's so rewarding on the other side. So there's a lot that we have to push through, but there are no, Alex just came from LA. I live in LA. There are no overnight stories. Those are not true. It's hard work, and it's being prepared when opportunity knocks so you can say yes and open the door.
Yeah, that's very encouraging. Very, very encouraging. Dr. Krista, when I had opportunity to work with you guys, there was a big team and there was multiple teams. And in my head, the first thing I thought was, how does she oversee all these different pieces, but still have the energy? She's having meetings and she's walking on her treadmill. Like, she is like multitasking over here. But I loved it because like you still kept a cool head. And I mean, but again, I know in the back, it's some roller coaster events that's happening back there. So for you, with the different the teams that you're overseeing and you're keeping Precision Nutrition as the number one go-to, highly respectable company organization that has, the way it even happened it's not even a brick and mortar. So everything happens remotely. That's another shocker. But like, how have you been able to kind of link all this together and deal with your own personal doubts and struggles that you kind of have, either with your ability, with your team, or the team's ability, or just anything in general?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really rich question. I think we could spend a lot of time, pulling it apart. But I think it was Alex that said something, that phrase, proving yourself. And that really kind of caught my attention, because I think that is such an unbelievably dangerous phrase for so many of us that want to be liked and want to be successful and want to be taken seriously. And I say it's dangerous because what occurs is, if we walk into a situation, like you said, with a big team, like you get on a Zoom call and all of a sudden there's 20 people looking back at you and some of them have doctor in front of their name. Like you can be immobilized by thinking, oh my gosh, how do I prove myself? And that path leads nowhere good, because that is only ever an externalization of, wanting someone else to tell you that you're okay. And even if someone tells you you're okay, which they probably won't, but sometimes they do, you're still not going to ever feel okay unless you get okay inside of yourself. And so, to walk into a context and think, I got to prove myself, I got to show these people that I'm the boss and I'm the leader and I know what I'm talking about, that is a path to failure and anxiety and overwhelm and like imposter syndrome and all of the negative psychological consequences. So when I walk into that situation, I ask myself, what are the gifts that I bring personally? What are the things that I kind of naturally gravitate towards or have cultivated in myself? What do I love to do? What is kind of in my heart? And then how do I build a meaningful connection with each of these people and leverage their gifts and what do they do well and what do they love to do? And when you do that, first of all, the room gets way friendlier. Projects get way friendlier. Everything gets way friendlier. But then also you're no longer relying on this weird, like, isolationist model of I'm all alone and nobody likes me. And my default assumption is I have to make everyone like me and approve of me. What if my default assumption was I'm a vulnerable little human that has some advantages and disadvantages, and everyone in this room is the same? And all I have to do is find the connections and leverage them. Like, all of a sudden, it just changes the entire game, whether that's curriculum, whether that's team building, whether that's skill building, whether that's anything else. So, and I spent a long time trying to prove myself. When I started at Precision Nutrition, I was an academic. I was not an athlete. And at the time, when Precision Nutrition started, it was like 7 or 8 ex-top athletes and me. And they were, and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't just need to be smart. I need to be ripped and shredded and a top performer and national. Like I need to excel in all of the things. And so that attitude tripped me up for a really, really long time. But what I've since learned is that proving yourself is a path to nowhere. And really what you're looking to do is to begin with that little spark that's inside of you and think about how to help connect that little spark to all of the other people that you're working with. Now, if you're listening, that might sound a little bit woo-woo, but I think it goes back to what we were talking about with personal training, right? Clients can tell when they see you folding towels, whether you care about that towel folding, whether you care about them. When they walk into the gym, do you make eye contact and say, hi, Mrs. Smith, how are you doing today? Right? Are you able to reach out and really connect with another person? And if you're sitting with a client, do you make it about your own personal expertise? Like, oh, they have to see me as an expert? Or do you see the vulnerable human in front of you? And that second path, looking at other humans, is really, again, whether you're leading a team, whether you're writing curriculum, whatever it is, that's the path out of the struggle. What is the little, I think it was like a little pilot light inside me. What's the little pilot light inside me? And how can I use that to fuel what I'm doing? So yeah, I've definitely had my struggles. I think every nice, high achieving person has anxiety. I think every person that cares about doing a good job has imposter syndrome at some point, and if you're listening and feel like, oh, I'm the only one struggling with whatever I have, I assure you that you are not.
Not alone.
Not alone. And imposter syndrome certainly is one of the biggest non-secret secrets. And I've had other things too. Like, I recently discovered, hey, I score off the charts for ADHD. Guess that's why I can't focus on some things. So, you discover these things as you go along and you just add them to your toolbox of strengths and your ability to make connections, real connections with other human beings.
I appreciate that, KSD, because you answer your own personal question and you answered the last question I was going to ask you. But you said it so eloquently, and it just shines so much light on just recognizing, your strengths and allow yourself to be you and to be vulnerable. And that's what connects people to people. It's not someone posturing themselves or living behind their names and titles. It's connecting to them human to person, human to human. So again, I think the question I'm going to ask you about was when people, individuals that, second guess themselves to being exposed, to not just, what people think about them, but to opportunity that could actually lead to fulfill their passions. The foundational pieces is to just grow, learn who you are and know who you are. Recognize, some of the areas that you may find to be a default as actually a positive thing, but also leverage the people that you interact with and utilize both of your skill sets and both your skills to the greater good. And I think that's important because some people just don't know where to start, with their passion. Like I said, they'll sit on the couch, like Dr. Michelle is saying, just think about it, but never actually fulfill it. Alex, and so we have just a few moments. I do want to grab Alex's brain and Dr. Michelle's brain as we're closing. Now, you use your story, Alex, and it's very compelling and it's very real, and I think people really can connect with that. I think your answer, I'm not going to answer for you, but I was going to ask you, what would you tell somebody would be the first step to take? And I think one of the things you really talked about a lot was like the education piece. Not because you want to fulfill your role in your position, but also you want to make sure you are comfortable with where you're at and your standings and what your service that you're providing. But again, I don't want to be your voice, so I want to give you opportunity to give me your version.
Yeah, no, I mean the only thing I would add to that is, and I really kind of inadvertently touched on this before, throughout various points of the story, but I think no job can be about the next job. I think the next job comes when you do a good job with the job that you have, or just whatever it is. Like if you're just passionate about, I'm gonna do a great job with this, and I'm gonna find passion and fulfillment with this. I just think that that's where people notice, and that's where your opportunity comes from. A lot of times people are like, what's next for me? And I'm like, let's just focus. You have so much in front of you. There's so much opportunity right in front of you. Identify opportunity. Look at something that can sometimes people are always trying to be so innovative, but maybe you can just take something and do it a little bit better. So take a look at what is around you and look for opportunities in which you can build upon, as opposed to always trying to come up with something new or completely inventing something outside of the box. So I think that those are two things. And I have that conversation a lot with people, is just really, focusing a bit more on what's in front of you and mastering that, and also looking for opportunities to build upon things, as opposed to just always seeking out something that's not even in your view and having somebody try to give you insight as to what that is. Well, what's next, or what am I going to be, or what am I going to do? Like, I think it's right in front of a lot more people than they think.
Yeah. Okay. Dr. Michelle, with any endeavor, you always second guess yourself and consider going back to what is a surefire thing. But we know that doesn't necessarily lead to your passion or translates into your happiness. So what would be your words of encouragement that you would want to provide for others to help redirect them back on the path that they so dearly want to pursue?
I think to fast forward, where at the end, when you're in retirement or in your last days, what would you have liked to have accomplished? And it is thinking about the end that sometimes makes the beginning easier, because it is so worthwhile. What would you like to have? What do you want to have done? And that goes back to the theme of making this world a better place, making your life the best it can be. It gives you courage to say, you know what, I'll do the hard stuff today so that I can have the joy of tomorrow. And I think that one saying I have is that we are all composers creating the symphonies that will be played at our eulogies. So what is it how do you want this symphony to be played? And it that kind of perspective, I think, takes away some of the fear. In going back to what Alex and KSD talked about, one of the guests on my show, anyway, she's phenomenal, Thomasina Duncan. And she said, and when she was in law school, one of her professors said, a good street sweeper never looks back. Because if your job is done so well, right, you don't have to check behind yourself, whether it's the towel folding, just to not to keep berating that issue, but it's a very visual reference that all of us can relate to, that do whatever it is that you're doing well, because you'll learn from it. Others are observing you. You will get more opportunities, and you'll teach yourself about what you like and what you don't like. But the hard work is worth it. Another person, my old mentor, said, quoted Thomas Edison. People often miss opportunity because it's dressed in overalls and looks like work. And so you have to do it all. We each have passions, follow that passion, and there are people there to help. Everybody's willing to help if you ask the right questions. Your last Grit and Heart panel talked a lot about just what do you do, the actual action steps in approaching someone if you want to follow what they were, a bunch of entrepreneurs who were phenomenal, but those actual steps, just listen to last month's podcast. It's fun. There's so much learning to be done, which I think is a theme. But it's the work is worth it. It's fun to get up and do it. So I encourage everybody who's listening to just, like Nike says, do it.
Just do it. It's plain and simple. Yep. Thank you for those words. And as we're getting ready to close, I want everyone to have opportunity to just find, how can anyone reach you guys, learn more about you, more about your company. Casey, I'm going to start off with you because I feel like I cannot leave a golden nugget I can't just leave it on the ground. I have to pick it up. I would like for you to let us know about Precision Nutrition, what ways people can learn more about it. But I do want to give you the opportunity, if you do have a few words that you want to provide for anyone out there who struggles with their sort of personally, as far as how they how they can transfer over professionally, and just kind of help them to, deal with how they can pursue their own dreams, whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, just to build on the piece about hard work. Hard work is awesome. I'm a huge fan of hard work. I think right work is also crucial, right? Because many of us find ourselves grinding away at the wrong things, right? And it's like pushing the wall, right? We're working really hard, but it's not going anywhere. So, where possible, get support, get mentorship, get guidance from believable experts. Who in your field is already doing the thing that you want to do and has done it repeatedly? Go and talk to them, find out how they did it. Like what's the advice they would give? Can you find a mentor? Can you find a counselor? Can you find a therapist? I mean, as per Dr. Michelle, I'm a huge fan of therapy, counseling. It makes a massive difference. And you can think of it, all of us are intellectual athletes or emotional athletes if we are in coaching. But what do athletes have? Coaches, right? The best athletes have the most coaches. So, if you are struggling, get support, because there is support for whatever it is. And so don't just work hard, because you might be working hard at the wrong things. and sometimes I'm a big fan of hard work, but I'm also a big fan of quitting the things that you shouldn't be doing. So what should I start doing? What should I stop doing? What should I do more of, less of? Could I be doing something differently? This is something that a coach, counselor, therapist, mentor, whoever can tell you and save you an unbelievable amount of time and energy. So that would be kind of like my parting words. Don't do this alone. I mean, use your team, use your networks, use whatever you have. This is not a solo journey, for sure. And then in terms of where people can find me, precisionnutrition.com is probably one of the best places to start. You can read stuff about coaching, nutrition, how we coach, how we think, how we do things. My own personal social media, you can find me, Krista Scott Dixon, on Facebook. I've got a few books floating around out there. I've got a book I published recently. You can find that on Amazon. It's called Why Me Want Eat. It's about fixing like food issues that you might have. And then on social, you can just look for @Stumptuous, so STUMPTUOUS. I'm on Instagram. So yeah, just Google Krista Scott Dixon. I think I'm the only one in the world, so it shouldn't be too hard to find me if you look for that.
Great. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you for adding your piece in there. Really, I just felt a digging need to I need to come back to. So I'm glad that you got a chance to say that. Yeah. Alex, I'll let you go next.
Yeah, no, I mean, anybody can email me anytime, of course, alex.zimmerman@equinox.com. Equinox, obviously, there's a ton of information there as well. And at Alex Zimmerman 07 on Instagram as well. Happy to, I'd be happy to connect with anybody. I think that, Equinox, sometimes people say, oh, that's the gym you work at. I'm like, well, it's, Equinox really, I think, has evolved quite a bit. And that's where I've been very fortunate. We have everything from a 1-hour experience to a 7-day experience, whether you're at a hotel or you're on a trip in another country or what have you. And so I think that, people sometimes don't quite understand how it represents a bit more. And so, always happy to chat, connect.
Great. And Equinox is on every social media tag as well. So if you can, at least follow them and kind of dig a little deeper on your own leisure. So thank you, Alex.
And Varus right now. Yeah, Varus is our digital solution that's now available outside the 4 walls. And so, we're very excited about the way in which we're scaling our impact and our reach from a programmatic, perspective.
And that's Varus, VARUS?
VARIIS.
IIS. Okay.
And that is now available to anyone, anywhere.
Okay, great.
So I have to say that I'm a 9-year Equinox member, and when the closure, the Varus app opened up, and Equinox really is, I think it's an embodiment of what it is that we talk about. It's an evolution from fitness itself, but then the totality of the human, and talking about how Krista brought in culture. It's culture in context. And Krista, I ordered your book. I was hoping it would arrive before we had this panel. But Me Eat Want, listen, it's a constant struggle. So I'm looking forward to reading that.
You're not alone. You never
Yeah.
are.
As for how you can reach me, I have a website, dr-michelle.com, and Instagram is, I'm constantly on there too much, not that I want to, but it's a great way to connect because that's what we're doing, virtually. So it's at Dr. Michelle, that's no, it's not. It's DOCTOR.MICHELE. And Google me as well, Michelle Cooley Strickland. It's a long name. My podcast is every Tuesday, so we don't compete with you, Rashonda. You're on Thursdays, so it's a long title. So the She Built It podcast with Melanie and Dr. Michelle. The She Built It podcast with Melanie and Dr. Michelle. Try to get Alexa to play it. It's lots of fun, but once she does hear it, it's great to listen to her every week. So please check us out, and lots of stuff that we do at drmichelle.com. So thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. And I am enjoying these conversations, and I'm watching the time click, and I'm looking at the time going down, like, oh, but I got to get this in. And the reason why is because you guys carry so much valuable knowledge and just nuggets that you don't want to keep to yourself. You want to spread to others. So I appreciate you coming on this panel, having these conversations. And I want for you guys, you viewers out there, take advantage of some of this information. If you know that you have some colleagues or friends or family that have these similar struggles, spread the good news and share it to your other people. But as always, each month we're going to come with these great conversations. So stay tuned. Join in every conversation every month. Meet some of these great leaders and be a part of conversations with thoughtful leaders. Again, this is Rashonda Thornton. I want to thank again my panel one last time. Thank you all for being a part of this. And yeah, you're welcome. And I will see you guys the next month. Take care. Be safe. Remember to love yourself and reflect it through your health, nutrition, and your wellness. See you guys later. Bye-bye. So thanks for being a part of their stories, their struggles, and their successes. Because of the work of the local dairy farmers and efforts from Midwest Dairy, we were able to bring more monthly conversations to you from mindful leaders that can be able to come to the table and tell you about their own path that can inspire you. So be on the lookout for next month's panel, Conversations with Mindful Leaders. See you next month.